Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the most devastating testimony I have ever seen about an Attorney General of the United States corrupting the rule of law in pursuit of a political agenda for the President of the United States. And all of America can right now see exactly what's going on. The Attorney General, acting not as a champion of the rule of law or the Constitution, but rather as a sycophant and a consigliere for Donald Trump, has decided to go out and undermine cases, derail cases, and kill cases that affect Donald Trump's chosen ones, despite overwhelming evidence against them and despite guilty pleas by some of them. Now, it's going to take us a long time to sort out the full litany of unregistered foreign agents and liars and felons and frauds who have gotten a get-out-of-jail-free card by Attorney General William Barr at the behest of Donald Trump. And we should track all of that down. But more immediately, America faces two problems where Attorney General Barr is again threatening the rule of law and justice. And one is the public health response to the pandemic, which has now cost more than 120,000 Americans their lives. And the other is the fall election, which is the people's opportunity to speak, if allowed to do so, without election interference by foreign powers or by the government of the United States itself in an effort to intimidate and repress the vote. So I want to come to Mr. Ayer. In your testimony, you testify that Attorney General Barr has worked to, quote, create an authoritarian president. And I wrote down some of your basic points here. We obviously don't have time to get into all of them, but you say he undermined the work of independent fact finders, such as the FBI. He ignored and trampled Congress's powers under the Appropriations Clause. He categorically stonewalled congressional oversight and state criminal subpoenas. He attacked and undermined the inspectors general. He used political cronies to review and decide issues of special interest to the president. He reversed government positions in the Stone and Flynn prosecutions. He used the DOJ as a tool of the president's reelection campaign. He directed law enforcement forces to violate the First Amendment rights of peaceful protesters in Lafayette Square, and on and on and on, all the way to sacking Jeffrey Berman just a day or two ago. But among these things, you mentioned almost in passing that the Attorney General had tried to provide an echo to the president by likening public health orders by legitimate politically elected authorities in America, governors and mayors, to house arrest. And he said that he would work to jawbone the governors into rolling back public health orders put in place as the only mechanism we have to try to lower the death count and control this out-of-control pandemic, which is now ravaging Florida, Texas, South Carolina, Louisiana, Arkansas, large areas of the South and the West right now. What is the problem with the Attorney General deciding he wants to jawbone the governors and likening their policies to house arrest, which we all know is completely phony?
Your microphone, sir.
The whole issue of how do you deal with public health problems? Obviously, there's a role for the federal government and one that's not been performed terribly well in terms of coordinating overall supplies. But the basic decision-making with regard to how you're going to make the particular decisions of what people need to do, they're very local and they're very unique to local areas. And the judgments, I think everybody recognizes, basically are to be made at the state and the local level in terms of when to open, how much, in what ways, et cetera. And what appears to have happened here, and it didn't just happen once, it appears to have happened several times, is that Mr. Barr, and he really does appear to be echoing statements that the president has periodically tweeted and made about opening up. Obviously, the president's been very intense about wanting to get everything opened up. So Barr has echoed that and, essentially threatened. He's threatened to jawbone, but he's also in connection with the question about churches and whether churches are going to be treated in a certain way and are they somehow being treated less favorably than others. They've actually gone to court in some of those instances. Now, the Supreme Court rejected a challenge a couple of weeks ago with regard to one restriction on a church in California, and I have not heard anything about the Justice Department actually filing anything in connection with opening up issues concerning churches, but he continues to talk about the need to open up. And fundamentally, it's ironic to have a Republican administration intruding so far into such a sensitive core local government, state government question as local public health regulations dealing with the particularities of a case. So that's really—
Thank you, Mr. I want to ask you one other question, if I might, which is simply, he's also provided an echo for the president, who has voted himself by mail in New York and in Florida, and whose party encourages its members to go out and vote by mail. But he's echoed the president in saying there's something wrong with voting by mail, and he's alleged that voting by mail makes us vulnerable to foreign influence by counterfeit ballots. Is that an appropriate role for the Attorney General of the United States?
Well, I think it's not, and especially it's not because it appears to be something that there's absolutely no truth in at all. There are 5 states that do nothing but vote by mail, and every other state, I think virtually every other state, uses vote by mail somewhat substantially. And so the idea that we're going to throw cold water on the notion that we should use vote by mail, it's just disreputable. And it's entirely inappropriate. It really isn't his job anyway. If there were some law enforcement function there, it might be. But basically, he's just echoing the president, which is something he does more and more. And frankly, my worry is that he's going to do it more and more in the weeks and months ahead as we get closer to the election.
Do you think he's acting more like a campaign operative than like the Attorney General of the United States?
Well, as I said in my opening statement, I think he is, in fact, acting as an advocate for whatever fantasies the president wants to advance, one of which is this Obamagate nonsense that the members of this committee spew out as well. And he is now doing this, but the worst thing about it is he is doing it with the backdrop of an investigation which he has in his pocket. And nobody knows what that investigation is supposedly going to come up with, but he is hinting that he has terrible, incriminating things that he's found. And no one else is in a position to say he's wrong, but he is wrong.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Our great senators. Hi, Chuck. He used to love me when I was a Democrat, you know.